When a timber yard is sawing a tree up, obviously cutting it through and through is the easiest and quickest method of converting the tree into boards. But for valuable timber, teak and other valuable hardwoods, although it's a lot more effort on the part of the sawmill to quarter saw a tree, which means, and there's one or two different methods of doing that, but what you really end up with is that the tree gets sawn up so that most of the boards are like this one here. And so to do that, they saw in half, take a board or two out, and then saw vertically there, and then sometimes even on the last bit they will cut the boards like that to get the most efficient use of the tree with the timber with vertical grain. And if you're using teak for decking, you really want vertical grain teak. If I just roll this over, and if you imagine this as your, it's a bit wide for teak decking, but if that was your piece of teak on your deck, the hard parts of the grain would be what you were standing on, so the teak wouldn't wear down very quickly. It would ridge considerably because the softer parts of the grain would wear away. If that was your piece of teak with its vertical grain, with the softer bits of grain in between those lines, then what would happen over the years the softer bits would wear away, but the harder bits would remain, so you'd end up with a ridged plank, and that's partly what gives teak its non-slip. It's just lots of little ridges to grip onto. This is just a piece of softwood, but demonstrates the grain on the end really. And because a lot of the planking I use is spruce, that gets sawn up out of bulks of timber slightly larger than this, but something like a 9" by 3" bulk or a 6" by 3" bulk. And that gets selected for the grain running the right way. And so then I just buy in a bundle of spruce planks and just stick them in a pile and pull them out when I need them, use them to build the dinghy, and that's it. If you're going to build a dinghy out of mahogany or something like that, most of the mahogany that gets imported into the UK comes in log form, sawn through and through. And the difference in building a dinghy out of spruce or mahogany, really, you still have to take a template of the planks, you still end up with a shape of what you need. You can lie it on a piece of spruce, cut round it, but with the mahogany boards, which can be 3 foot across, you can lie your template on and maybe get 2 or 3 planks, because they're all curved, you may be able to jiggle around in the width of the board and get more planks out. The worry of that, of course, is that you're starting to ignore the grain in the plank. Now this is a board of mahogany, or more accurately, half a board of mahogany. This jagged edge here is actually the heart of the tree, and most mahogany trees end up with a split or a shake pretty much all the way up the heart of the tree. And as you can see here, there are other shakes and splits just because of the tension in the tree. When it's dried, seasoned, it has to shrink somewhere, and so usually it ends up splitting at the centre. But this was actually twice this width. Before it got split. And if I draw on the end of it here, this is the waney edge, and we've got a couple of inches of sapwood on the side there. Hardwood has less sapwood on a tree than softwood does, as a proportion of the diameter. And this tree here, if this is a cross section through it, because you can't really get to film it that well, and that's a sort of representation of what the grain's actually doing on the end of this plank. So when we come to sticking it on trestles and getting our plank patterns and lining them on there and jiggling them around, looking out for the shakes and any wormholes near the sapwood, we also need to bear in mind that ideally we want our plank to be cut somewhere between here, where the limit of the sapwood is. This is all pretty good into here. By the time we get to here, the grain is not starting to help us really. If we cut our plank out of this section here, our grain is more along the plank than across the plank, and that's not ideal. So in reality we can only use the outer edges out of a plank that was 3'6" diameter, or the tree was 3'6" diameter, the plank was 3'6" wide there. We've actually only got two sort of 14-15 inch sections, and the same in the other half of the plank, that is good for planking. The middle section that we're choosing not to use for our planking, we can use for other things. We can use them for the floorboards, the stringers, any other smaller bits of joinery that we're doing in the boat. But this is the area that we want to cut our planking out of, really. This is a thinner piece of mahogany, like the big plank we had, and you can see the grain as it changes from being reasonably vertical here as it comes across. This is a section of the tree just above the heart. The heart would be down here, and you can see that there's shakes and cracks all around near the heartwood. But also on this piece, there are several thunder shakes which actually go across the grain of the timber. These can be caused by the tree being hit by lightning, but more likely when it was felled and when it hits the ground, there's an enormous amount of stress and strain on the tree, and that can crack the internal grain. So certainly with mahogany, these thunder shakes are something to look out for and avoid, because it does weaken the plank. That's just a piece of timber that was on a plank of oak, and you can see that was where a branch was coming off the tree, and as it's dried and seasoned, it's fairly spectacularly cracked and shrunk, but it's also distorted the plank considerably. So you just need to be aware of faults in the planking and what they can do later on as they dry out.